Well, hello, all you lovely people. It is so great to have you here with us. So honored that you came to sit in these lovely, comfy chairs. Some are straight, some are at an angle, but that didn't stop you. I am Michael Singer. I'm one of the pastors here at Freedom House Church. And let's give it up for our senior pastors, Troy and Penny Maxwell. And I want to give it up for them because it was 11 years ago that they decided to just trust God, have faith in Him, and obey Him, and start this church here at Freedom House. So what God has done in my life individually to change me and grow me in my relationship with Him, the fact that I'm even standing here right now is just off of their faith and willingness to start this church. So I'm honored and privileged to be a part of the team. Also want to honor my lovely wife, Charley Singer. Yeah. Yeah, smoking hot like a bonfire in winter, son. I'll use an analogy. She's gonna kill me when we get home. I'll use an analogy of this is my favorite time of the season because it involves hunting, and she is the doe to my buck. So, man, I'm glad y'all awed on that one. No, I really love just hanging out with my wife, man. We love what we have together and enjoy our time together. So. If y'all could exit the building, we'd appreciate it. Hey, let me go on to what we're talking about today before I get in trouble. Hey, we're in this series called Operation. You've probably noticed the little operation games out in the coffee shop area and in our salt resource area. And if you remember the game or are familiar with it, the whole idea is trying to pick these little different body parts and things out of these cutouts without hitting the side, because then you'll get the We learned some great wisdom from Pastor Troy and how to always be a winner. Take the batteries out, and you can always get them out without it buzzing you. So Pastor Troy, thank you for that. But this whole series is the reason why we called it Operation is not so we could put games out there. The reason why we called this Operation is because we really believe here that if we will take the time to sit on God's operating table long enough, that His greatest desire is to heal us, not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, everything. And He wants to put us back on His path that He has for us. And that's why we're doing this. Last week, Pastor Troy started the series, and he talked about the spare rib. And he began to tell just how our ribs function on our body. Our ribs help to cover vital organs that are there, and so they're very protective and very important from that standpoint. He also talked about pressure, that there is pressure that can break our ribs, but it takes 400 pounds of pressure to actually do that, so there's some strength there. But he referenced that and made that apply to our own lives because we all at some point have experienced pressure. And he mentioned that usually we have one of two responses. When pressure comes, either we break down or we choose to grow up. The thing that makes ribs so strong that he continued to tell us is that it's not about one individual rib and its own strength. It's about the fact that ribs are stronger because they recognize that they're better together and they're more strong when they're working together. So the fact that they're connected together, that is what provides the strength. And here's the strength we need in our life, and the reason why we need to be connected with other people is because he mentioned that we all have a place that's called the other side. And the other side is an uncomfortable place where God wants to take us, but the reality is for us to get to the other side, we not only need God, but we need somebody else who is willing to walk with us to the other side. He mentioned Jonathan, who was the son of Saul, and Jonathan's armor bearer, and how because Jonathan's armor bearer decided to be connected and to go to the other side with Jonathan, the two of them were able to defeat an entire army. Today, I want to share with you about the Charley horse. So that's what we're going to talk about. If you're here and you've ever had a Charley horse, just raise your hand up. And hopefully your tricep doesn't get a Charley horse when you do that. Every service is like 99.34% of the crowd raises their hand. We've all experienced it. And a Charley horse is that time when a muscle in your body decides to tighten up and it hurts like mad. It's excruciating and you don't even know what to do. You almost feel like you're paralyzed and you're stuck. You didn't ask it. You weren't doing anything. It just froze up on you. And the reason why Charley horses happen one of the big reasons is typically because there is a lack of something. And I want to sit right here on this whole idea of lack of something causing a Charley horse. One of the biggest lacks that causes a Charley horse is a lack of hydration. So if we don't have liquids in us, then we end up cramping up. If you're a football fan, college football's kicking off, pro football, but, it never fails, especially in college football, you see guys running on and off the field. They get injured, one player after another, and they didn't break anything, they didn't tear anything. They just got a Charley horse and are cramping up. And they talk about how hot it is and the lack of fluid. So a lack of water can cause a Charley horse. They say bananas provide potassium, and that when you eat a lot of bananas, the potassium is a great advocate in helping keep us from getting Charley horses. So we can get Charley horses just due to a lack of potassium. We can also get a Charley horse if we lack muscle rest. So we overexert our muscles or we working our muscles too hard. And I don't have that problem, you can tell. I don't fill out this shirt like Pastor Troy does. So I don't have that issue. That's not why I usually get a Charley horse. My muscles get plenty of rest. Except for this one. But yeah, there's this lack. It's a lack that causes our muscles to tighten up and almost feel like that we can't move and we become paralyzed. If you read the Bible and you encounter Jesus in there and he's talking, anytime there was a moment for Jesus to make this awe-inspiring, life-changing statement or this moment to change someone's life spiritually or give a spiritual principle, he usually never just told it. He always told a story about life and then related a real-life, tangible example to what is going on or what we can expect on an internal perspective. And so I don't want to just stay here on what physically a Charley horse does to us, but what I really want to get to is I want us to see today how we can have spiritual Charley horses. Now, there are times in our life where circumstances can happen and they can cause us to lock up and to almost feel paralyzed, and we don't know what to do, and we just sit still without moving, hoping that it will pass very, very soon. The thing about a Charley horse is that usually there's not a lot of warning when you get a Charley horse. It's not like you start to get a quiver in your lip and your shoulders start to move, and then, oh, gosh, there's that Charley horse. I knew that thing was coming. No. The Charley horse just hits you, and all of a sudden you're just stuck. Oh, my gosh. Oh, my hamstring is stuck. It's out of nowhere. Life, most of us, I would say all of us, have had some time in life where a circumstance just happened. Out of nowhere, we got blindsided and hit, just like a Charley horse creeps up on us. Now, as I was thinking about this lack, I began to think through, how does lack work with us? I know how it works from the Charley horse in our body, but how does it work for us spiritually and emotionally in our mind? And so I started writing just a few, and I mean just a few, potential areas where lack can come in and cause us to experience a spiritual or emotional or a thought, just a Charley horse in our life. And here's some of those things. Lacking the confidence to exercise our faith in a new arena or area in our life where faith is needed. It can cause us to lock up. Sometimes we lack trust due to past hurts, and that can cause us to be paralyzed. Lack a proper understanding of what God says about who we are and how he designed us, and not what Jimmy, Johnny, Ricky, Bobby, and Mike say about who we are. Some of you old school R&B fans got a little bit of that. Y'all don't get me off track. We lack the ability to know God is with us when we are walking through an extremely tough time. We lack the desire to be around people, and we lack the desire to seek their help. We lack the patience to let God continue working in our life story when we are experiencing and going through such difficult things that no human can answer the question, why? Why is this happening? Sometimes we lack the discipline or the boundaries and even the accountability to stop taking action and living our life out in a way that does not line up with God's best and how he wants us to live or act. Sometimes we call that sin. Sometimes we just lack. There are many different areas where lack can try to attack us. But here's the reality of what I want to talk about today, is that lack is no longer going to keep you and me down. Because today, we're going to take lack and we're going to smack lack. All right? So even though I just told you many areas, let's move on from there and see how we can erase the lack and get away from lack. And let's give it a good old smiggity, ooh, smack. Here's the phrase. If I had you to walk away with one phrase, it's this phrase right here. Connect and act to restore the lack. Connect and act to restore the lack. Now, I want you to repeat that after me. Again, I said repeat it after me, so I'll say it first, then you say it. I'm going to break it in half to make it easy on everybody. But I want you to say it loud out the gate. Sometimes people whisper in the first time they repeat. We're going to be repetitious heroes and just yell, all right? So, connect and act to restore what we lack. Oh, let's do it one more time. Y'all sounded so good. Connect and act to restore what we lack. So as I was thinking about this, I was like, all right, God, I need you to give me a story from the Bible where someone goes through this kind of Charley horse time in their life spiritually, and they have this lack, and it causes them to stiffen up. And I was having a hard time, and I thought of this one story, and when I first thought of it, I was like, oh, yeah, that's not going to fit. I know right out the gate that's not going to fit. And God said, hold on, little man. Let me make it fit for you, because I want to show you something different in that story that will help you. So I'm going to read a story in Luke chapter 5. It's verse 17 through 26. And this is going to be in the New International Version that I'm reading from. So Luke chapter 5, verse 17 through 26. It says this. One day, as he, talking about Jesus, was teaching, the Pharisees and teachers of the law, these are the big dogs that know everything about the Old Testament, what we call the Old Testament, who had come from every village of Galilee and from Judea and Jerusalem, were sitting there. And the power of the Lord was present for Jesus to heal the sick. Some men came carrying a paralytic on a mat and tried to take him into the house to lay him before Jesus. When they could not find a way to do this because of the crowd, they went up on the roof and they lowered him on his mat through the tiles of the roof into the middle of the crowd, right in front of Jesus. And you can underline or whatever, circle verse 20. When Jesus saw their faith, he said, "Friend, your sins are forgiven." The Pharisees and the teachers of the law began thinking to themselves, "Who is this fellow who speaks blasphemy? Who can forgive sins but God alone?" Now Jesus knew what they were thinking, and he asked, "Why are you thinking these things in your hearts? Which is easier, to say your sins are forgiven, or to say, get up and walk? But that you may know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins." He said to the paralyzed man, "I tell you, get up, take your mat, and go home." Immediately, the guy stood up in front of them, took what he had been lying on, and went home praising God. Everyone was amazed and gave praise to God. They were filled with awe and said, "We have seen some remarkable things today." God had me to step back from this story and look at it a little differently. And he said, "Michael, I want you to look specifically at these group of guys." And he said, "I don't want you to see them as individuals. Even the paralytic guy, I don't want you to see him as an individual this time. I want you to see this story as those guys are one unit. Kind of like your body, Michael, has many different parts, but it's still just one body. Kind of like there are a lot of things going on in your life and a lot of emotions and a lot of things you think about and a lot of this or that involved in your life. You know, you're a husband, you're a dad, you're a son. There's a lot of things going on, but it's still one unit." And he said, "Now, Michael, I want you to understand something. There's usually something about us that is paralyzed. And it might be an avenue, an area of our life where we've been hurt and we feel paralyzed. And Michael, that paralyzed part is like this paralyzed guy on the mat. You have a Charley horse spiritually in your life or emotionally in your life, and it's caused you to freeze up. And so here's what you need to do. In order to get better from that thing, you need to be willing to take the paralyzed part of who you are and lay it before Jesus. Lay it before God, because that is where it's going to get healed. And he said, in doing that, I want to show you two things that allowed this group of guys to accomplish and get the paralyzed part of their group, this one man on that mat, to get him healed from Jesus that day. They took action and they understood connection. I love verse 20. It says, when Jesus saw their faith. Now, I don't think that was one of those moments where Jesus read a mind or read a heart and was like, humada, humada, humada. Oh, I see your faith in your head. Oh, it's so beautiful. You just have so much trust in me. He didn't look at their heart and go, oh, there it is. There's that hope that's in your heart. I see your faith. No. Jesus looked up and said, well, good googly moogly. Them jokers have cut a hole out of the roof and they are dropping. Faith is active, and I can see their faith. No questions asked. I don't have to wonder if they love it. I don't have to wonder if they believe that he can heal me. They just dropped the man through the roof simply because they didn't get through the crowd. Mark says that they dug a hole through the roof and laid him down. And Jesus was probably wondering, all right, one of two things are going to happen. Spiritually, the guy who owns this place is going to ask me to lay hands on the roof to heal it, or he's going to know that I'm a carpenter and I'm going to have to lay a hammer on that baby. Either way, Jesus is laying down an H that day. So they bring this guy and they take action. But the other beautiful thing outside of the action, because when I get a Charley horse and I cramp up, and usually it's in my hamstring, I don't know what to do to fix it, but I know I got to try to do something. And so typically, wherever I'm at, I try to get out and stand up and put some pressure on it, and it hurts so bad, and I try to stretch. And I lean down and I stretch. You got me, camera? You got me? You got me? But I try to act and stretch it out. That's what these guys understood. They knew they had to take action no matter what it took. The other thing that was crucial and key, though, that God showed me is that a huge part of this even happening was their connection. You see, had the paralyzed guy not been connected to this group of guys, he would have never had anybody to carry him to get healed from the one who could heal him. When Mark talks about it, it says that there was a group of guys, and it took 4 out of the group to carry the one man on the mat. Connect and act to restore what we lack. Connect and act to restore what we lack. These guys got it. They acted, they connected, and they restored a guy who lacked the ability to stand up and walk because he was a paralytic. I graduated from college, my illustrious 7-year career, get a bachelor's degree. Graduated from college in 2002. I arrived in college in 1995. In case your math wasn't working for you, I just figured I'd let you know. I know nobody has a graphing calculator, so you probably couldn't answer that. 2002 graduated. I had applied to be a part of a college ministry that I was actually involved in called InterVarsity Christian Fellowship. I had applied to be a part of that and to be a staff worker at a college, and they placed me here in Charlotte, North Carolina. I didn't realize it in the moment, but as I look back, I was headed towards a spiritual Charley horse in my life. Because as I prepared to move to Charlotte, I had no intent of running from God. I wasn't mad at God. I wasn't just tired and fed up and just ready to just quit. I wasn't planning on, getting here and going, man, I'm going to the club, baby. We're going to knock a few moves out. Wobble, baby, wobble. I wasn't going to do all that. I had no plans of doing that. But there was a lack that began to come in that I was going to allow that was not good and was sending me straight down a road to be paralyzed and experience Charley horse. When I was involved with InterVarsity Christian Fellowship in college, I was highly involved. I was a leader for a number of years on their leadership team because it's a student-led ministry. People knew my face. I was there all the time. I did our small groups. We call them small groups. I did all that. People knew me. And so there was an expectation on me. And it wasn't a bad one. I'm speaking to the healthy expectation that when we get involved in something and people know that we're actively involved, whether it's any level from serving, starting out, or you're a leader or whatever way you're leading in that, There's a healthy expectation that God gives us of accountability. You see, when I was around these people, I knew that they knew me, and it helped me to make sure I was making decisions that aligned myself with God because my life was on display. When I came to Charlotte, I was getting excited that nobody here knew me because I wanted a moment just to kind of be still and kind of take a step back. Not all the way back, but just take a step back. And I was heading for a spiritual Charley horse. And I realized there were some things that God had just inbred in me and put in me a long time ago that helped me to avoid getting paralyzed and having this spiritual Charley horse overtake me in my life. And I want to share with you 3 things that I did to keep from getting a spiritual Charley horse. Now, I'm going to forewarn you. My brain is a scary place to be. And so I'm going to describe these 3 things in a way that might not make a whole lot of sense to you. And I'll try to make them make sense. But understand, it's my brain and my wife does understand. The first one is that, and I'm going to refer to this in a way where we need to saddle up some horses in order to defeat Charley horse. I was imagining this like a race, and we're going to spank Charley horse and get him. We're going to beat him. He's not going to beat us anymore. So I'm going to tell you some horses we're going to saddle up on. The first one is the steeplechase horse. The only reason I chose that is because it has the word steeple in it. And a lot of people think of a church when they do steeple, you know, here's the church, here's the steeple, open the doors, and the people. That whole deal. It's the only reason I chose it. Thank you. I'm glad you got it, Weston. So steeplechase horse equals staying connected to church. Staying connected to church. One of the things I knew I was going to do when I moved to Charlotte, even though I was glad to be away from a bunch of people that knew me and out of that position, is I knew I was going to find a church. And I'm thankful that God gave me that lifeline to hold on to so I didn't end up paralyzed. And I love what Jesus says about the church in Matthew chapter 16, verse 18. And he tells us and reveals why in the world we should even be connected with church. He looks at Peter, one of his disciples, whose name means rock. And he says, I tell you, Peter, and on this rock today I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not overcome it. If you feel like you're being overcome by just craziness and it feels like the gates of hell and every enemy is attacking you, then getting connected to a church is the place God designed to be your battlefield. And in that space, the gates of hell cannot overcome you because you're connected with a church. Acts chapter 2, verse 44 through 45, I just love the picture it paints of how God intended the church to be and how the church started. This is explaining the first church, if you will. Verse 44, now all who believed were together and had all things in common and sold their possessions and goods and divided them among all as anyone had need. The power and the strength of the church is that we can do far more together than we can by ourselves. If you feel like you're at a place of lack, then get in with the church because we're called to all encourage and be there for one another so that we can help each other and pick each other up and walk arm in arm and go to the other side together. That's the power of the church, and that's why it's important when we feel like we're approaching a Charley horse, we feel like there's a lack, that we need to get connected and stay connected with the church. The second horse we need to saddle up is the Clydesdale horse. And it sounds weird saying Clydesdale horse because Clydesdale alone tells that it's a horse, but just go with me. This is staying connected to community, the Clydesdale horse. Now, if you're not familiar with the Clydesdale, I grew up in Louisiana, small town called Natchitoches, and even though it was a small town, we had the bangingest parades. Like, our parades did not match the size of our town. Like, people came from everywhere to see our parades, great parades, and I'll never forget when the Charley horse, good Lord, when the Clydesdale horses came to our parade. And this is a big deal. Clydesdale horses just don't go to every parade. At least, I don't think they do. For the sake of my hurt and pain, just assume that they do. So, Clydesdale horses come, and they're these massive horses that are big. But the thing about the Clydesdale horses is that they don't just pick any horse. These horses are groomed, and they're chosen, and they're like a close-knit family. And those are the horses that pull the wagon and do it, and they're together. And so from the Clydesdale horses, we need to stay in community. We have to stay in community because they represent a community that works together. We're launching our life groups. And I'm here to tell you that you get connected to the church, but probably the greatest thing outside of getting connected to just coming to church on Sunday is if you want community, we have to get connected outside of Sunday service. I don't care how long of a conversation you have out in our lobby, you are probably not going to experience community. Our life groups are a big way to get to experience community, to get to know people, to help each other. Go to Strong Men's Conference. Do something other than Sunday service. Connect with somebody over coffee. Get involved in serving. Get to know some people serving. Whatever the case is, community is huge. And I love what Hebrews chapter 10, verse 24 through 25 says in the New Living Translation. It says, let us think of ways to motivate one another to acts of love and good works. Let us not neglect our meeting together, so let's have some community, as some people do, but let's encourage one another, especially now that the day of his return is drawing near. The power of community and the thing that helped me when I felt like that Charley horse in my life was coming on was getting in community. The power of community is that we get to encourage one another and provide hope to one another. That whenever we feel like we're lacking something and we feel paralyzed, that there's somebody else God puts in our life that has the same story and can say, God can do it, but I've also seen him do it. So let me give you the spiritual principle and also the practical application of how that principle works. And we can encourage and give each other hope and push each other on to good works and good deeds. The last horse that I had to saddle up on was the farm horse. And this is staying connected to serving. Staying connected to serving. Matthew chapter 20, verses 25 through 28, just to set that up a little bit. There are two of Jesus' disciples, they're brothers. They're called the sons of Zebedee. And their mama one day takes them up to Jesus and says, hey, Jesus, these are my two boys. You know them. Can you do me a favor? When you establish your kingdom, can you set one of my sons on your right and one of my sons on your left? And you know the sons of Zebedee are like, oh my gosh, the other boys, the other 10 of these disciples are going to ride us to no end. And the other 10 disciples were hot. They looked at these two just with disgust and anger. And so Jesus is seeing all this unfolding, and so he calls them together, and we pick up here. And Jesus brought them together, and he said, you know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and those who are great exercise authority over them. Yet it shall not be so among you. But whoever desires to become great among you, let him be your servant. And whoever desires to be first among you, let him be your slave. And then he says, I'm not just telling you this, but I'm Jesus and I'm living it. He says, just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but came to serve and to give his life a ransom for many. If you want to know how Jesus wants us to carry ourselves, it's clear. He wants us to serve. I love 1 Peter 4:10. Each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. Every person sitting in this seat has a gift. And there's nobody that can tell me differently or talk me out of that reality. And the thing I love about this passage in 1 Peter is that our gift is a representation of God's grace. And so if we desire to extend grace to others, then we need to serve them and extend the gift that God has given us. You know, one of the things I love about who I am, and I know I probably got a lot of it from my parents, and God has really grown it a lot in me, is that one of my things is that I love to serve, and I love to help other people. And I'm thankful that that's one of the driving forces for me. Matter of fact, if you ask me, Michael, if you could tell me just one thing that has had the greatest impact on your life and you growing in your relationship with God and you being who you are, I would say the one biggest area has been my willingness and my activity to serve. Now, I have a little bit of beef with this because sometimes we feel like that we have to have 14 fleeces and 12 people come to tell us what our gift is before we decide to get involved and serve. And for me, it didn't happen like that. I think most of us, when it comes to serving, it's kind of like the Elijah in the cave syndrome. Is that Elijah was in a cave one day, and he was waiting to hear from God, and he heard a thunder, this loud noise. He runs out. Is that you, God? God wasn't in that. He didn't say anything. Earthquake. Oh my gosh. Did you hear the sound of the earthquake? God's got to be in that, baby. It's big. It's loud. God, is that you? Didn't hear him say anything. He's sitting there and all of a sudden a small whisper. Elijah. He walks out. God's voice was in the whisper. When I walked through the doors of Freedom House, God whispered to me to get me to serve. And here's what he said. Michael, you got 2 arms and 2 legs. You're meeting in a school and there's a gym that you're sitting in with chairs out. I'd about guarantee you, Michael, that they don't play kickball and volleyball and basketball in this gym with all these chairs out. So you know what? You can take a chair and fold it. Like a taco, Michael, because I'm receiving food. When God deals with me in food, I get it. You can fold it. And somebody designed this thing called a chair rack. And you can hang chairs on it. Chair, rack, hang chairs on the rack. Basically, God was saying, Michael, you don't have to know exactly what your calling is. You don't even have to know really what all your gifts and what you're good at, because I didn't at that point know everything I was good at. But what you do need to do is act like my son Jesus, and you need to serve, and you need to do something. You don't have to know how to do it. Just start somewhere. And I guarantee you this, because I've lived it out, I can guarantee you this, that if you'll just begin somewhere, that God will show you who you really are, and he'll take you down a path that'll get you doing something that he designed you to do, and you'll be extending grace to others all along the way as you serve. Connect and act to restore what we lack. There's a British athlete by the name of Derek Redmond, and Derek Redmond is an athlete in Britain because he is a 400-meter sprinter. At the age of 19, Derek Redmond shattered the British record for the time in the 400 meters. At the age of 23, in 1988, Derek Redmond was preparing to run the 400 meters in that year's Olympics. And about 10 minutes before the race, he had to withdraw from even running because he had messed up his Achilles tendon and was unable to run and couldn't get back to a place where he felt like he could run that event. So he was 23 then. 4 years later at the next Olympics, he was 27 years old, 1992 Olympic Games in Barcelona. Derek Redmond has won his initial heats and is preparing to run a semifinal heat. But let me explain to you Derek Redmond's mentality for this year. Derek Redmond obviously is a fast guy, and people knew it because he had already broken the British record in the 400 meters. Derek Redmond was not going to leave that Olympics without walking out with a medal. He knew it. Everybody else knew that he was one of the contenders for a medal. He didn't care what medal, but he knew that Derek Redmond was going to leave the Olympics that day with a medal. They take the top 4 finishers from each semifinal heat to compete in the final race of the 400 to get those medals. when they tell the story about what happened that day, Jim Redmond got there, and as his son went to prepare for the event, he went up into the stands in the stadium, and he climbed to the very top of the stadium, and he was actually very close to where they had the Olympic torch lit. And as he's standing up there watching his son that day, he's rooting him on and cheering him on, and all of a sudden, his son just past halfway in the race, pulls a hamstring, and he's stopped in his tracks. He's reached a paralyzing moment where it seems like it's done. And Jim Redmond said, as soon as he saw his son, he began to make it, when his son went down, he began to make his way through the crowd and through that stadium. His son decided he was going to act, and he wasn't going to sit there and just stop. And so he begins to act. And his father joins him on the track. He skirts security guard. You can see in the video, he's like, "Get away from me. This is my boy." And I love what he said in the interview, a different interview later on. He said when he got to his son, he wrapped his arms around him and he said, "I'm here, son. We'll finish together." And I love the end of that video because his dad said, "Look, I started this thing with my son, and I was ready to finish and go across the finish line with him. And that's what I wanted to do." The thing I love about that picture that this paints is that we have times in life where we feel like life has hit us in a way that there's so much lack that we feel that we just freeze up. We get a Charley horse, we get a cramp, and we don't feel like moving, we don't feel like going. We just want to lay in the sadness, the hurt, the disappointment. We just want to stop. And God is saying to us, I'm up in the top of the stadium of your life. And as soon as I see you get knocked down and paralyzed and froze up because of a life circumstance or something somebody did to you, I want you to know I start making my way through the crowd because that's my baby boy and my baby girl, and I want to help them out. And if you'll just take the time to take some action and not just stay there, then I'm going to meet you in the middle of your action, and we're going to connect together, and we're going to restore where this lack has tried to come in, and we're going to do it together. I'm going to wrap my arms around you, whether you like it or not, but will you connect with me and wrap your arms back around me so that we can walk and finish together? Because I created you in your mother's womb. So baby, I've been there since the beginning. And you're not going to finish the finish line without me, because I need to be a part of that and you need to be connected to me. If you will, do me a favor and just close your eyes for a moment. And I just want you to think about whatever God might be saying to you right now. That's the only reason I have you close your eyes. You see the picture that paints. And that's really how God is. He's going to fight through everything to get to us. But we have a choice to make. Or we're going to be willing to not get paralyzed, act and connect, and have Him help us through this time where it feels like we have a Charley horse in our life and we're stuck. Today is your chance to connect with Him. And your action is going to be very simple. If you feel like for the first time you've never connected with God, your whole life has been lacking Him. You've never started a relationship with Him. Not church, not going and sitting in a seat. I'm talking about a real relationship. If that's you and you've never connected with Him and you've lacked Him for your life and being a part of your life, and you want to do that today, the only action I ask you to do is just lift your hand up and show Him that you want to connect with Him. I see your hands over on the left and the front down here, back left, middle, the middle, all through the middle, right side. Once you've raised that hand, the back right, you can put your hand down. Also, I know life has, will, and will continue to offer us opportunities to experience emotional, spiritual, our thought, to experience Charley horses and cramping up and feeling paralyzed. We all have to deal with some tough stuff in life. And I'm telling you, that if you'll just just for a moment decide, I'm not going to sit and let this attack me, but I'm going to act and go back at it. That God is ready and waiting to connect with you to help you fight it and get on the other side and to redeem you and let you be free from the stiffening pain. If you're here and maybe you already have a relationship with God, but you're like, Michael, I either can sense a Charley horse coming on, or I feel like I'm heading down a path, or I'm in the middle of one now and I feel locked up and paralyzed. Whatever that is, if you feel like you need God to connect with you right now and you need to connect with Him to get through that, I just want you to lift your hand and say, God, I need you. I see your hands all on the left, middle, and the back. Men, women, everybody raising your hands. You can put your hand down. If you will, repeat this prayer after me. God, thank you for this opportunity, for choosing me to sit in this chair to hear your truth. God, thank you so much that you're watching my life and you're cheering me on and you're waiting for any opportunity to jump out of your seat, to connect with me, and to help me finish my race. That's clear to me today. And I'm going to accept your connection. I'm going to put my arms around you as you've already put yours around me. Thank you for helping me walk through this time of lack, allowing me to not be paralyzed anymore. In Jesus' name, amen. Y'all give it up for God. We really do appreciate y'all deciding to be with us here on this Sunday. And thank you for all the first-time guests that decided to step into a place where you've never been. We appreciate it. We look forward to seeing you again. Freedom House, don't forget, connect and act to restore what we lack. You are dismissed. Have a great weekend.